let's get going with the characteristics of living things and beginnings of cell theory with abiogenesis and other related concepts. So this is our biology unit, and our refresher from past years is the idea that we need both living components of the atmosphere, not just atmosphere, but the planet, and non-living components. So in each picture here we have different components. Okay, the living ones are biotic. Even if they're dead now, they were once living, that counts as biotic. And abiotic is non-living. Okay, so to go through them quickly, our abiotic components of the pictures here, I don't know, I keep saying atmosphere, but we have the air, energy, rocks, forms. There is abiotic components of the soil and biotic components of the soil. So if you're talking about the worms and the old leaves, okay, that would be biotic. Our seeds, hair, puppies, carrots, trees, okay, those are all living components of an atmosphere or ecosystem. Okay, so to be alive, okay, you do not count as a living thing unless you can do all these things. Okay, so you must require energy. Okay, something like a rock doesn't require energy. Air doesn't require energy, so it's not alive. Okay, so we start with the food chain, so which is our plants that converts sunlight energy, and that's works its way up through the food chain, right? So we've got our, what do we got here? A deer, hawks, squirrels, chipmunks. Okay, they are all requiring energy to survive. Not everything is very clear in how it responds to stimuli. So a stimulus is something that causes a reaction to take place. So if you're holding onto a hot cast iron frying pan, okay, your brain says, hey, maybe I should let go of that hot frying pan before I burn my hand. Okay, so it might not feel like a tree can do anything, but as we'll learn later, they can grow towards the light and away from gravity, and the roots will actually grow towards gravity and away from light. So just being able to respond to that kind of stimuli counts. The species also needs to grow and develop and reproduce. Okay, now not every single individual of that species is able to reproduce, but living things in general can reproduce. Right? So fungi reproduce with spores, our plants reproduce with fruits and seeds, and some of them have stems that can help them reproduce asexually. Mammals, snakes, dinosaurs, okay, they all count as living things, and they have their own reproductive systems to help make more. Okay, now people might argue, well, if I smash a rock in half, there you go, I've made two. No, you haven't made more of that particular thing, you've just cut it in half and made it smaller. Okay, so that doesn't count as reproduction. Most living things have adaptations to help them survive. Okay, trees have either thin leaves or broad leaves. Cacti are adapted to preserve water. This bunny rabbit has an adaptation where its fur can change color so that it's more likely to be white in the winter and more of a brown color to blend in with the grass in the summertime. Okay, bird beaks, fins, ability to hold your breath underwater. Okay, those kinds of things are all physical adaptations that help species survive. Okay, and our living things also need to be able to exchange gases. So in humans, we have lungs, sharks, which is actually a kind of fish, they have gills. Grasshoppers have something called a spiracle. Some species can breathe a bit through their skin. And then leaves have holes in the bottom called stomata that allow carbon dioxide and oxygen to go in and out. Right, so every living thing is made of cells. Okay, so viruses kind of have their own category. They're not really living, but they can hitch a ride onto our bodies and reproduce that way. Okay, so viruses have their own group, but all living things are either bacteria, plants, animals, or fungi. Okay, and there's two kinds of bacteria: proteobacteria, I think it's called, and archaebacteria, so two kinds anyways. Everything else fits in those other 5 kingdoms. Okay, so cells are the building block of life. So every single living thing has cells. Okay, sometimes it's only a cell. That's all it is. Okay, there's certain diatoms and paramecium and euglena, or what's that one that starts with an A? An amoeba. Okay, those might only be one cell, but it's still a living thing because it can do all the things: reproduce, have adaptations, grow, develop, those things. Okay, in human bodies, we have a lot of specialized cells for different jobs, right? Like blood cells carry oxygen, muscle cells for movement and doing push-ups and flexing on people. Okay, nerve cells for thinking and memorizing all these lovely biology concepts. Okay, so the different cells might not any longer be able to just survive on their own. Like a nerve cell on its own in a petri dish will die, right? It needs to be connected to the rest of our systems. Okay, but non-living items are abiotic components in the ecosystem. Don't have cells. Okay, so let's get on to cell theory. There were people who thought, I think that how you get mice is all you need is some clothes and some wheat and some time, and poof, you have mice. Okay, in my shed, you might have noticed the same thing. Empty shed in the wintertime, some grass seed and some soil, and in the spring, ta-da, mice. Okay, but instead of that actually happening, now we know that they use it as a food source and it's an attractant, right? So just because you have sticky honey on the floor somewhere doesn't mean that that sticky honey turns into ants. Okay, it means it's attracted ants. So this guy, Francesco Redi, come here. He did an experiment to prove it, because people would say, oh, you leave a piece of meat on the counter and it makes flies. Ta-da! Okay, something can come basically from nothing. And Pasteur is another one. Louis Pasteur did some experiments. Okay, so he tried putting a steak, apparently, probably a piece of cheaper meat, in a jar, and noticed, hey, if flies go and land on the meat, then more baby flies and maggots grow. Okay, they are not able to just reproduce all by themselves. Okay, so he put an open flask, and it was only guys that could do science back then, right? The girls had to stay home and cook. And so he noticed, okay, flies can make it in, maggots grow, which are baby flies, and there we go, we have life. Okay, in this one, he put like a cloth with holes in it, and so that was enough to attract the flies, and they noticed that their meat was there, and they tried to go and lay their eggs. Okay, but when you had a completely sealed flask, like a Tupperware, that's when you first started noticing, hey, maybe flies don't just come out of meat because it didn't come out of that meat by itself. Okay, so a couple of words are called abiogenesis and biogenesis. So abiogenesis is the idea that you can have something out of nothing. Biogenesis means you need a cell to start doing things with. Okay, so this guy, John, I want to flip through, I want to make it bigger for you so you can see. There you go. Okay, so he found if you have a flask and you boil it and then you leave it, hey, look at that. Bacteria starts to grow. Okay, and this would be like a nutrient-rich solution. So even if you killed any of the germs or bacteria or whatever living things are in there, they can get back in. So over here, they tried boiling it, and then right as it started to cool, put in a cork, and hey, look at that. No bacteria growing. Okay, so this would be the beginning of sterilization. So I haven't heard of this guy very much. Okay, it's Mr. Spallanzani, sounds like Italian maybe. But Louis Pasteur definitely made that famous. Okay, people thought that it was just air, magic air all by itself was able to cause, like spirits caused evil diseases, right? People think that. Now we know, nope, germs. Okay, germs are a thing. Bacteria. Okay, there's Pasteur. So Louis Pasteur had this special tube, okay, to prove that you had to have life come from other life. So he found a special way to put a kink in the tube so that you could heat up the nutrient-rich solution and the air would go out. And you could still allow some air in, but what happens based on the shape of this design is you couldn't, the air could get in, but the germs couldn't. Okay, so in this one, they broke the glass off and hey, look, full of germs again. And in this one, if you get the liquid in the stem, then it's contaminated by that bacteria. Okay, so this top one, air can get in, but it doesn't touch the germs. So this is a TED Talk video that you can watch. That's right beside this presentation. Okay, Schleiden and Schwann, must be some Germans or Hungary or Dutch. This is major. Okay, so huge points of all biology. Okay, people didn't used to know this. People didn't used to know that all living things are made of one or more cells. But now we do. We're so smart. Good job, science. All life functions take place in cells, and cells are the smallest unit of life. So does the nucleus count as a living thing? No. The mitochondria? No. Okay, none of those things by themselves. So you need to have a cell with those main organelles that we're going to talk about in a different PowerPoint to count as a living thing. And this was the one we've just been talking about. Okay, it's that all cells don't just come from air. Okay, they come from pre-existing cells, right? Like bacteria in the air, for example. And they reproduce through something called cell division, specifically mitosis and meiosis. Hey, what did the science teacher say when she dropped her stapler on her toe? Ow, mitosis. Get it? Mitosis. Okay. Some cell research that's taking place, people get quite excited about, is atomic force microscopes. We're taking pictures of molecules, gene mapping and sequencing, right? You can get to Ancestry.com or whatever, and you can find out where your genetics come from and your ancestors. Okay, there's X-ray crystallography, green fluorescent proteins. Okay, lots of neat things going on in the world of science, especially with DNA, right? We can maybe get rid of some diseases by tinkering with DNA and cloning, but we're not sure if we want to do that. So stay tuned for more.